Nearly 30,000 child trips are made over the road each year. Stroud students commute to Dungog schools. Two recent near accidents have the parents at their wits' end. Literally hundreds of letters have been written to bureaucrats and politicians with little response. Countless demonstrations have been held, yet the road and the danger remains.
My children are of the last to get on the bus, so quite often they are without a seat. They have to sit on the floor or stand up. So if the bus was involved in an accident, they would probably be the first ones that went through the windscreen.
I drive my children to school every day, so I won't allow them to go by bus. I think it's too dangerous, the road's too dangerous.
What would you say to the politicians if they're watching now?
I wouldn't say anything. I'd grab them by the scruff of the neck and shake them hard.
A recent NRMA readers' poll rated the road as the third worst in rural New South Wales, behind the Pacific and Princes Highway. The bad stretch runs for about 8 kilometres, dissecting two council areas, the Dungog and Great Lakes Shires.
How high is this road on the list of priorities of the council?
Unfortunately, in 1984 it was number 5, it is now down to number 8.
Well, that doesn't seem to make sense.
No, unfortunately it doesn't make sense, but the council as a whole generally says that the road is not as important as those roads on the coastal area.
Dungog Shire President and bus driver Doug Shelton says it would cost millions of dollars to build a new road, money which the government simply won't give them. All they can do is running repairs. Locals say conditions are bad enough for people who know the potholes and blind corners, but they say it's the motorists unaccustomed to the road that really create dangerous situations.
I guess an accident can happen at any time on any road. The likelihood of it here is very high. Being confronted, coming around a corner with a large vehicle like a bus or one of the semi-trailer lorries or that type of vehicle, accidents can happen quite easily.
Okay.
Over the past few weeks, the price of petrol has slid to one of the lowest levels seen in years. Oil companies were playing a vicious price war, subsidising their operators in an attempt to starve out the smaller companies. As a result, many service stations were able to offer petrol for around 40 cents a litre. The standoff finally broke this afternoon. Shell was the first to back down, informing its operators today the subsidies were off. Shell managers immediately had to push their prices up to around 55 cents and paid the price of being first with empty driveways. However, neighbouring operators soon followed suit and the majority are expected to be on a par by tomorrow. The Prices Surveillance Authority has approved a 2-cent increase in the maximum wholesale price of petrol to 50.56 cents from midnight Sunday, in line with a rise in the Consumer Price Index. The Redhead dump has been operating for 15 years and is almost full. Lake Macquarie Council plans to extend its boundaries to give further dumping space until 1993. The council is also considering creating a new dump on a site adjacent to the old one. Both ideas have been rejected by many locals who say they've put up with the facility for 15 years and that is long enough. The residents have banded together to form CARE, Communities Against Rubbishing the Environment. According to CARE, the dump poses health risks as it is sprayed with dangerous pesticides and any extension will infringe on valuable bushland.
What do the residents or CARE then suggest that the council do to overcome their dump problems?
It's not for us to tell them what to do. They've got engineers and everything else. We want to preserve our area that we've got.
Today, representatives from CARE met with council officers on site to discuss their case. Amongst their ammunition, a water sample from the discharge dump, analysed by a Newcastle University chemist.
For example, I would be surprised if Lake Macquarie Council would accept this for discharge into Lake Macquarie itself, or if the Water Board would accept this for discharge into the sewer or into their stormwater drains.
The council will accept submissions on the extension until the 17th of this month. However, according to the consultants hired to examine the dumping problem, it is the only viable short-term option.
The residents have determined to fight their battle on the issue of the pesticides. Tonight they'll hold another public meeting at the Redhead Surf Club, where the gathering will be asked to support, among other motions, a call for a Department of Health study into the health of residents in the vicinity of the dump. Ross Hampton for NBN News.
Mr Yabsley visited Cessnock yesterday and did not mince words today over his feelings about the council's opposition to the jail.
Cessnock Council is being unbelievably stupid, without putting it too strongly. At the same time as virtually every other shire and council around rural New South Wales is beating a path to my door saying, you know, we want a $50 million institution in our area. Cessnock Council, despite the fact that there is an existing jail there and that the financial benefits, apart from anything else, are abundantly obvious, Cessnock Council is saying no. And I think Cessnock Council is quite clearly out of step with what the local community would say about another jail.
Cessnock is one of 15 sites shortlisted. This includes a strong bid by Muswellbrook Council. But Mr Yabsley said the 540-hectare site, St Heliers, which will house a minimum security prison and hopefully a periodic detention centre, was not necessarily a more likely site for the controversial jail, even though a $600,000 security fence and lights are being built.
It should be neither an advantage nor a disadvantage. You know, there are establishments around the state where minimum security institutions are in close proximity and in some cases side by side with maximum security institutions. On the other hand, there are maximum security institutions that stand on their own.
St Heliers was designed as a detention centre and was bought for $1.8 million last year. Just under $3 million is being spent to convert it into a unique minimum security setup in New South Wales, with self-catering units for 124 prisoners who will strive for self-sufficiency from the land. The inmates will arrive in a couple of months and include some of the country's worst criminals, transferring from the good behaviour system. The decision on the maximum security jail will be made by April. Presenting the award to Superintendent Fred Rees was Minister for Industrial Relations Peter Morris, who said the workers from No. 2 Merchant Mill were an inspiration to others. The award recognised the successful implementation of the Value Added Management, or VAM, process in the mill. Workers identify problems and brainstorming sessions held. Then practical solutions are tried, assessed and refined, and then adopted. Since 4 VAM groups were formed in 1987, 170 successful ideas have been used, and the increased productivity bears testament to this. Mr Morris said major responsibility for the manufacturing process is now in the hands of production workers, not middle management. Workers are more committed to the organisation, and this is the key to greater efficiency in Australian industry and better paid jobs with a future. But he said, management itself must change its attitudes and practices if the workforce is to be expected to embrace the revolution taking place on the shop floor.
Garbage strikes impact heavily on communities, and Cessnock is starting to feel the effects of 12 days without the service. The pile of rubbish outside the dump now stretches to the main road. Bins in the city's parks and streets can hold no more, and the surplus is spreading throughout the city. The dispute is between the council and garbage collectors over sick leave, but the locals are fast losing patience with both sides.
I do feel as if something really has to be done.
It's really off.
There is talk about them bringing someone in to sack the council and put an administrator in, as they did with Newcastle. I think it would be the best thing that ever happened in this place.
Arguably, the worst affected are residents of old properties which use pan toilets. They're being forced to bury their sewage in their own backyards. Council officers met with the striking men this morning, but talks broke down. Although Cessnock Mayor Marie Callaghan denies the impasse has created a crisis, she has ordered a special council meeting for tonight, a meeting which she hopes will find a solution to the problem.
In 1944, the average age of the crew was 19. The average age today was 65. HMAS Strawn, a corvette, was commissioned at the State Dockyard on the 14th of March 1944 and served in the Pacific area at the end of the war. While in Hong Kong, the Strawn struck a mine, damaging the stern and rudder, but according to Seaman Keogh, the Newcastle-built ship didn't budge.
But at no time did our great ship spring a leak, and we think that must have been a credit to the people and to the workmen at Newcastle Dockyard. At least we say thank you to them anyway.
The 11 men out of a group of around 100 who served on the Strawn shared a few stories over a beer today. One man was missing at the reunion, 70-year-old skipper Wally Burke. He was getting married.
Personal safety.
President of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, John Mulligan, presented the medal. It's only the third time it's been awarded in Australia, although the decoration dates back to the 16th century. But this could be the first time the medal has ever been awarded to a firefighter for planning to start a fire. Hazel Morris was in charge of the scorched earth policy, which would be implemented if Japan invaded New South Wales during the war. Fire Chief Mulligan said Basil's task, should the unthinkable happen, was awesome.
He would set about the explosion and the fire in a pattern of flammable combustion to make sure it was a very, very speedy fire. Weather conditions would come into this, flammable liquids would come into it, but the goal was to destroy everything in the path of the enemy, so they had nothing to support them.
The plan called for the total destruction of homes, churches, factories and farmland. In spite of the scale, Basil Morris said it could have been done.
Yes, definitely, yes. It was well provided for, well prepared, and it could have been implemented. Naturally, the fire brigade would have been part and parcel of the armed services and all the rest of it, and that would have been part of the implemented plan.
University venue today to learn more about the possible impact of the greenhouse effect in the Hunter region. The greenhouse effect is a trapping of heat originating from the Earth's surface by trace gases in the atmosphere. Heat is trapped naturally in several ways, including by clouds. But recently there has been concern about the addition of extra trace gases from the burning of fossil fuels and pollution. Many scientists believe we can expect an increase in global warming, but according to Dr. Howard Bridgman of Newcastle University, the greenhouse effect is not yet proven.
The greenhouse effect is not a prediction. No atmospheric scientist worth his salt would state specifically that the greenhouse effect is definitely going to occur.
But Dr. Bridgman says new conditions may apply to the Hunter region by the year 2030. These include temperatures on average 3 degrees centigrade higher, particularly in winter. Summer rain may increase by 20%, but decrease by 10% in winter. Sea levels may rise by between 40 and 120 centimetres, and there may be an increase in the frequency of severe local storms because of greater atmospheric instability.
Potentially the most significant change that might occur in the Hunter would be an increase in storminess. Particularly for people who live along the coast, they might be prepared to have more small-scale, regional-scale storms that would cause local flooding. I don't think we're talking about major severity. I mean, I don't see, for example, the greenhouse having any influence on creating another 1955 flood, for example. It would be much more local scale, low-lying type flooding. The type of thing that happened a couple of years ago in Wallsend, where we had some low-lying flooding that flooded all the cricket pitches.
Lloyd Davies of the Agriculture Department agrees flooding could be a problem due to more rain and a higher sea level. He says farms in low areas, such as below Maitland, might be flooded more often. So could you see some Maitland farmers perhaps going out of business?
It will depend on the intensity, but yes, if they lose significant amounts of crops because of extra flooding, well, it's certainly a major problem for them.
But the greenhouse effect wouldn't be all bad for the agricultural sector. He says winter warming and increased summer rain would mean improved winter pasture growth, and intensively housed industries such as pigs and poultry would benefit. The haymaking season would also extend, but warmer weather could affect the quality of wine grapes.
In addition, quality can be affected by rain during the harvest period, and excessive rain and humidity can cause outbreaks of fungus diseases.
In coastal areas, it's believed erosion would be one of the major problems. Dr. Peter Roy of the Sydney University says Newcastle is fortunate as many beaches have plenty of sand. But he says the climate could change to alter the dominant wind direction, with a serious effect on some beaches.
If the wind regime was to change slightly, say more stronger southerlies or more stronger easterlies or something like that, then the beach would adopt a new orientation, and it would do that by pivoting around some central point so that one end would tend to erode and the other end would tend to accrete.
What would happen then to surrounding houses?
Well, if houses were built on the end that was eroding, they would end up in the water.
The forum also detailed the possible loss of wetlands and the need to implement land management practices. Flood barriers, better water drainage and more trees were also discussed as ways to plan for the future. In some areas, buildings now being approved by councils are expected to have long lives. Steve O'Connor of the Port Stephens Shire Council says there are significant implications for developments in foreshore areas which need to be considered now.
We could look at establishing a floor level now, higher than perhaps what might otherwise be designed. And if there is a sea level rise, then that development is going to be safe. It could be looking at developments which are capable of being either lifted at a later stage or alternatively pulled back from the coast if they're under threat.
Are any such plans actually?
Well, Mike, we got together with the agents at a conference a few weeks ago, and a lot of them expressed a desire to be involved in Telethon. And so far we hadn't found a way of being involved, and somebody popped up and said, let's run a dinner. We've got some fabulous raffles. We've got support from Jay's, Churchill's, Bamback Electronics, Maitland Tyre Mart, and OPSM at this stage will probably come in. We've got some great stuff.
Along with Carter Edwards, who will be the main guest for the evening, there's a certain group of footballers who will make an appearance.
Alan spoken to Lee Morn, and he's going to bring along Sammy Stewart, Slam and Sammy, I hope. And Alan McMahon will be invited at this stage. We have to get official invitations out on it. A few other players might come along, but there'll be sporting bodies there as well as the Knights. You know, it should be a good night for them.
And of course, I believe they're not just only attending, but they're going to be part and parcel of the whole show. Some interviews and that sort of thing.
Interviews, might be some surprises along the track. You never know.
And seeing it is a TAB-run dinner, the night wouldn't be the same without representatives from the racing fraternity. I believe the big man of NBN Racing, Gary Harley, will be along with a couple of jocks.
Yes, your man there will be Gary. Gary's been tremendous for this night. He's offered his services, and Gary is in the process today chasing up racing fraternity, blokes like Maxie Lees, Robert Thompson and Wayne Harris, we hope, plus others Gary's looking at the moment. Gary does a good job with these racing people, and as everyone knows, he's a specialist in that trade.
It would come as a surprise to many to know that there is a tunnel under the Hunter River at Duckenfield.
Use the safety of it.
In the mid-20s, 36 metres down for the Chichester water pipeline. It's regularly inspected by waterboard workers who've often wondered how anyone would get back out of the tunnel if they were injured. They put the same question to the police rescue squad, which left with a challenge. The constable volunteered to play the part of a worker with an injured leg. While safety officers looked on, the patient was trussed up in the Stokes liver and lifted head first, straight up the main shaft. After 15 nerve-wracking minutes, the liver was safely on the surface. Police and the waterboard exercise was a complete success, and future inspections of the line can now be carried out with more confidence.
Out on the tarmacs, the nation's domestic air fleet slept like large flightless birds, while pilots, meanwhile, were meeting around the nation to discuss wages they say have slipped unfairly against executive salaries because of the wages accord. But against earlier thousands of overseas visitors, the confusion spoiled travel plans, and in Sydney, dreadful weather made for a miserable introduction to Australia.